Welcome back to Timo's Dinky Detailing. Today I'm going to be doing an Austin A30. This is a toy that I got with a bunch of other toys. It almost doesn't look like a Dinky toy. This is a 40s toy and it's small, almost as small as a Matchbox. And the wheels also look kind of like Matchbox wheels with the gray color, and they're solid plastic all the way to the axle. That's the only Dinky toy I remember seeing that had that other than tracked vehicles. So anyway, this one looks like it's going to need new springs and shocks in the rear end, and it's going to need some work to bring it up to snuff. The casting looks in good condition, and obviously the paint is chipped up a bit. The base is bent in a bit. That's why it looks like it's sagging at the rear end. And it's got these gray plastic wheels. I don't like them, and I'm going to have to do something about it. It's a little bit damaged at the front, but mostly the casting looks good. So I'm going to try and match the paint on this one and make it look just like the original. So the first step is to drill out the rivets, and once again I'm using this drill. It's a 3/8 drill. It's way too big for the job, but it's the best quality drill that I have. I came across a few of these from my son's friend's grandfather who passed away, and I got a few of these drills, and they're center drilling and they are just beautiful, and they're perfect for taking out these rivets because it's almost effortless. Here I'm doing it with the hand drill, and I'm thinking I should go back to the milling machine and put it there because this is kind of a difficult way to take it out compared with the milling machine. Anyway, looks like it worked. Out it pops. So there's the base. It's going to have to be straightened out. Front axle. At least all the parts are there. So here I'm going to try and drill these out. So I'm putting the center drill here, and I put some cool tool because this metal is really chewy. And this is the old way that I've been doing it, and I'm really not happy with it. It's better to go into the milling machine and do this job properly. So here we are. This is the milling vise. I've got a little block I made up that suspends the car on its hood and on its trunk, or on the bonnet and the boot. And a little bit of spongy material. That's the stuff I use on my workbench. And then I line up my center drill, and I'm in the right position so I can just do my center drilling, and tapping all in one position. I think on this model that's the last time, unless there's some unusual conditions where I can't clamp the thing, but I don't want to do it by hand anymore. It's way better to do it in the milling machine. Now I go part way, and I'm putting the cool tool in there. It's oil, it's a cooling lubricant, because if I don't use that, I frequently am breaking the end of the drill bit inside the casting because the metal kind of builds up on the cutting surfaces of the drill, and when it does that, then it heats up and it gets more friction until it breaks off the end of the drill inside the casting. And if it's not deep enough in there, you can see it. See, it's attached itself to the end of the drill. So now I've taken it out and I'm tapping the holes, putting 440 tap because I use 440 screws. There's button socket head cap screws, and these are high quality taps. These are machine taps, so they have a spiral point. So a hand tap, you have to keep backing it off and then turn a little deeper and back it off again. This one, it pushes the swarf in front of it, so if you have a deep enough hole, it just pushes it down into the hole. So that saves me a lot of work, and I love those taps. They work beautifully. So now to take the wheels off, I like to use my file. This is a very high quality Nicholson file. I mean, it's a professional quality file. It's not prohibitively expensive or anything, but you just got to find somewhere that sells the real thing, not some Chinese thing. Anyway, it's beautiful. I've ground off one edge of it so that there's no teeth on the edge, so it doesn't file into the wheel as I'm filing off that mushroom. And now this one, because it's been bent in so far, it's needing a lot of straightening out. It's not easy because you can't get the I can't get the parallel pliers over top of those little wings that hold the rear axle in place. So it's a little bit of futzing and bending and trying different ways until I get the thing to be straight. It's good that the steel is soft, so you can move it with your hands, or in this case you tap it with a hammer, and that's the best way really to straighten it out. This is a hammer I made when I was a toolmaker, or apprentice toolmaker. So now the parts are ready to be paint stripped. But before we do that, I realize I better mix up the right color of paint if I want to match it. So I brought out my tan paint, and that white paint it's essentially an empty bottle, has a little bit of white paint at the bottom. And so I start mixing in there. And after a while, I get it close enough that I can start testing it on the model. And here I'm testing various different mixes. I don't want to show you having me mixing everything over and over. So I'm just shortening it up a bit so you can see that I spent a lot of time getting the color right. Now what I'm finding is it just keeps changing color because that jar wasn't clean. So I have another jar that's completely clean, so I'll pour it in there, mix it up, and now it's not going to change color because I drag it across the top of the jar where there's some white paint. So I should have started in this clean jar in the first place. So I'm trying to get it to be exact, and in fact I do get it to be pretty darn close. I mean, it's a little bit hard to see on the video. You think it's already there, but in real life it doesn't quite match. I probably spent an hour and a half mixing this paint, but nobody's going to want to watch an hour and a half, so I've cut it shorter so you can see basically how I got there. And now I mix it with the thinner, close it up, and it's ready for when I need to paint. You can see all the testing I did on it. So now we go outside, and I'm going to use the caustic soda. So here goes some boiling hot water from the kettle and some caustic soda. I'm happy to do this outside because I don't want that toxic stuff inside the house. I'm finding when I'm doing these, the bases of these Dinky toys, they're very hard to strip the paint off of. See the body, it's pretty much done now. but the base still has, it's still black. So I put it back in there for a while, and it comes off mostly, but you wind up having to brush it off. And it does get it to the point, and you can see here I've brushed it off the base. There's some rust there, so I'm putting it into the Evapo Rust to get rid of whatever rust is left. But somebody has pointed out to me that those bases were not painted, they were blued with gun blue. And that's why paint stripper doesn't work on them at all, but the Evapo Rust does, and to some degree the caustic soda works as well. So now we go to the body, and I'm cleaning it up with the brass wire brush. This casting is quite good. There's almost no flaws in it, so that's good. Doesn't have to be cleaned up too much. So now this is next day, and you can see the bluing is coming off on the paper towel. I always thought it was some kind of paint, but no, I think the guy's right. It's bluing. But the nice thing is it protects these bases really well. So even if they have a bit of rust on them, once you've cleaned off the bluing and Evapo rusted it, the sheet metal is in really good condition. So these ones are not ready yet, so they go back into the Evapo Rust and stay there maybe another overnight. I think the base came clear before, on the same day I put it in, but the axles had to be done overnight. So here we got some white primer going on. Like I said, the body didn't really need any work. The casting is in quite good condition. You can see as I'm spraying, it's revealing a spider has been building a web in my spray booth. I didn't notice it until later, but anyway, there you have it. I never saw the spider. So here's the next day, and we pull out the axles, and there's no rust on them at all anymore. So I'll still have to polish these up before I put it back together. So this is the shaft that is not attached to the base. It just has the tires, and it's held on by the base in the casting. There's a notch for the front axle. Now I've filed it down just enough so that the wheel will come off, so that there's as much material as possible on the end, so when I have to hammer it back together, it's easier to do. So I'm using, this is Tremclad High Performance. This is the professional paint, and I love this stuff. It works beautifully on these toys. I'm surprised. It's an excellent quality of paint. For the base, I'm using a different paint. This is a semi-gloss paint that works really beautifully on these bases, and I'm holding it with a magnet, and then in between there is a sheet of baking paper, and there's baking paper as well. I'm using baking paper for everything because the paint, even if it's not perfectly dry, will stick to almost anything else, but it won't stick to the baking paper. So now I've got everything else painted, the wheels painted black, and now I put the paint that we mixed up before, it goes into the airbrush, and I can go ahead and paint the model. I'm still learning how to work the airbrush. I'm watching other people's videos to see how they go about doing it, what the right way is, what the successful way is. It seems to me to be a long-term learning process, but I am getting better at it. On this one, I was able to get a very nice even coat and a lot of leveling thinner in there so that it shows up shiny in the booth. It's going to be shiny when it's dry. The only problem is the paint I'm using that I was mixing with, some of it was gloss and some of it was semi-gloss. So don't tell anybody, but because I don't show it in the video, but later on I sprayed the semi-gloss finish with the Mr. Hobby gloss finish. So now the tires have been painted black. I didn't like that gray, and I'm going to make silver hubs for them. So I'm taping them up, and I used a fancy hole punch for paper to make these little masks, little round masks. And I'm putting on the chrome spray paint. It's a pretty nice chrome spray paint, and I think these things came out pretty darn good. I was very happy that there wasn't any leakage of the spray paint underneath those tape masks I made. Look at how beautiful it is. So I'm really happy with that. That just looks great. So now I go to the buffing wheel on my grinder, put some compound on there and buff it up. It takes a few seconds and I don't have to spend a lot of time with sandpaper or anything, just the buffing compound, go over it, and in a minute or so I've got both shafts perfectly polished. Just beautiful. So now I'm going to be putting them on the base. So the one shaft, I left enough material on the end so it's sometimes hard even to get the wheel on. That way there's less hammering to do to get the shaft to be mushroomed again. So I've got my vice grips and my small hammer and make some noise. Okay, so the hammering is done. So I make the mushroom prettier by using this tool that has, it's hollow ground, so that when they spin it on there and using the hammer drill function, it makes a much more beautiful mushroom than just hammering. So kind of getting best of both worlds. I'm not able to get a mushroom just with the hammer drill, so I'm doing both. Alright, that's my fun sounding like I'm a blacksmith or something. And there's a beautiful mushroom, just like it had when it came out of the factory. So this is a new trick. I watched on somebody else's video. This is a brush used for painting ladies' nails. And you know what? It's brilliant because these things are not expensive at all, and they have all kinds of cool features. Like this feature is there's a ball on the end. It's kind of rough, and you put paint, it's for painting dots. Well, what kind of dots do we have on a car? Well, on this one, we've got tail lights. So I'm trying this out. I would highly recommend these things. They have a very nice, really fine brush at the other end, which you'll see me using in a moment. And they cost a fraction of what a hobby brush would cost. And actually, I find this one better than my Tamiya brush for very small items, for very small things like door handles and hinges and stuff. So I'm using, this is not the chrome paint, this is the ordinary silver paint from the marker. So I pushed a little bit out onto the bottom of a plastic shot glass, and here I'm using the Tamiya paintbrush, which is good for, that's good for some things. But you're going to see in a minute I'm going to use that nail painting brush to paint some other details, the smaller details. The Tamiya brush is too big and I tend to just wind up blobbing it over where I want it to paint. It's good for bumpers and stuff though. So this is the nail painting brush, and it's unbelievable. These tiny little parts, I'm able to paint them absolutely perfectly with no blobbing over at all. It's absolutely perfect. It just blows me away how good it is. And this one, it's kind of a salmon color, little rocks inside, so it kind of dresses up the workbench. And look how beautifully, every time I paint one of these, it's one after another. It's absolutely perfect. It's a very, very short bristles, so you have very, very good control. So now it's time to put it back together. So I've got those screws that I put in earlier. They've now been painted the same color as the body. So we take those out, and now I can put in the front axle, and the base goes in. It's all pretty straightforward. And put those screws back in place. Now I realize I forgot to do a bit of my detailing. I want to put a license plate on this. I think it needs a license plate. Looking at it after I'd done all that detailing and put it back together, and I go, it needs a license plate. So I got a license plate that I made for an earlier model, and maybe it's the same owner bought a new car. So this is where we started. A rough, play-worn toy in need of restoration. Let's see what it looks like now. Well, we got the color matched perfectly. I painted a few extra details that Dinky would not have done. It's got the new wheels with new hubs. I think it looks pretty nice. I'll give you a secret. I'm probably going to take this the next step, because I found that these cars were raced. And there's a lot of photos of these cars being in races. So I think I'm going to turn it into a race car. So I hope you enjoyed this episode of Timo's Dinky Detailing. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share, because that's how we get more of these videos. So until next time, be seeing you.